Blood is thicker than water, but apparently, it's not thicker than a shiny coat of custom Italian paint. I gave my son my life savings to save his dying business. He used it to buy a Lamborghini. So, I bought his entire company just to fire him on national television. For 40 years, I broke my back in commercial construction. I was the guy on the site at 5 a.m., breathing in dust and exhaust, making sure the steel went up straight and the concrete poured right. I wasn't a wealthy man, but I was a careful one. My late wife, Martha, and I built a quiet, comfortable life. We saved every spare dime for two things: our retirement and our only son, Preston. When Martha passed away from cancer 5 years ago, the medical bills took a massive bite out of our nest egg, but I still had roughly $850,000 tucked away in my pension and primary retirement accounts. It was enough to keep the lights on, the property taxes paid, and allow me to finally rest my aching joints. Preston was always ambitious. He had an MBA that I paid for, a closet full of tailored suits, and a relentless desire to be a Silicon Valley titan. 3 years ago, he founded a tech startup called Vertex Solutions. To hear him tell it, Vertex was going to change the world. To hear his accountants tell it, Vertex was burning through cash faster than a forest fire. The nightmare began on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my worn-out recliner, watching a baseball game, when Preston burst through my front door. He wasn't wearing his usual arrogant smirk. He was pale, sweating, and trembling. "Dad, I'm ruined," he choked out, collapsing onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. The venture capitalists pulled out at the last second. The payroll bounces on Friday. If I don't get a bridge loan immediately, they're going to liquidate Vertex. I'll lose everything. They'll take my house. Seeing your child in pain is a primal trigger for any parent. All I saw was the little boy who used to scrape his knees riding his bike in the driveway. He begged me. He cried. He promised me that the company had a massive government contract locked in for the next quarter, and he just needed to survive the month. He offered me 20% equity in Vertex and swore on his mother's grave that he would pay me back with interest within 6 months. I didn't consult my financial advisor. I didn't hire a lawyer to draft a contract. I was a father saving his son. The next morning, I went to the bank, absorbed the massive early withdrawal penalties, and transferred $800,000 directly into Preston's personal account, leaving myself with just enough to survive the year on canned soup and Social Security. "You saved my life, Dad," he told me, hugging me tightly in the bank lobby. "You won't regret this. I'm going to make you so proud." 2 weeks went by. Preston stopped answering my calls. At first, I assumed he was just busy righting the ship at Vertex. But when my water heater broke and I needed to ask him for a small, temporary advance on my repayment, my calls started going straight to voicemail. Then, his fiancée, Tiffany, a woman who looked at me like I was something she scraped off her designer shoes, blocked my number entirely. Anxiety gnawing at my gut. I drove my beat-up 2008 Ford truck to the gleaming glass and steel high-rise, where Vertex Solutions rented the entire top floor. When I pulled into the underground parking garage, I saw it, parked dead center in the spot marked CEO, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, was a brand-new, limited edition, cherry red Lamborghini Aventador. The sticker price on a machine like that was easily $500,000. A cold dread washed over me. I took the elevator up to the top floor. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I pushed past her, walking straight into Preston's massive corner office. Preston was leaning back in a $2,000 ergonomic chair, laughing into a headset. Tiffany sat on the leather sofa across from him, sipping champagne, admiring a diamond ring the size of a marble. "Preston," I said, my voice shaking. He dropped the headset, his face hardening instantly. "Dad, what are you doing here? You can't just barge into a corporate office." "Whose car is that downstairs?" I demanded, my heart hammering against my ribs. The Lamborghini. Whose is it? Preston had the audacity to sigh, rolling his eyes as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. It's a corporate lease, Dad. Image is everything in this town. We have to project success to attract the Series B investors. You told me payroll was bouncing. You swore on your mother's grave that you were losing your house. I stepped forward, pointing a trembling finger at him. Where is my money, Preston? Tiffany scoffed from the sofa. Oh, please, Henry, don't be so dramatic. Preston is a CEO. He deserves nice things. Besides, you gave him that money. It was a bridge loan, I roared, the betrayal ripping through my chest. Preston stood up, buttoning his tailored jacket. He looked me dead in the eye, and the coldness I saw there terrified me. A loan requires a contract, Dad, a promissory note, a repayment schedule. We have none of those things. Legally, the bank recognized it as a familial gift, and honestly, you're being a massive burden right now. I'm trying to build an empire, and you're dragging me down over a few $100,000 you were just going to let rot in a mutual fund anyway. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. Security is on their way up, Preston added casually, looking at his Rolex. Go home, Dad. I'll send you a check for a few thousand on the first of the month to keep you afloat. But don't ever disrespect me in my own office again. I was escorted out of the building by two men twice my size. I drove home in a daze, walked into my empty, quiet house, and wept. I was 68 years old, practically bankrupt, and my own flesh and blood had robbed me blind. For 3 months, I lived in a state of absolute misery. I ate cheap ramen noodles and kept the thermostat at 55 degrees to save on heating. I picked up a part-time job scanning receipts at a local hardware store just to afford my blood pressure medication. Preston kept his word about the few thousand he had his assistant mail me a single humiliating check for $1,000 with a sticky note that read, groceries. I hit rock bottom on a Tuesday. I was digging through a dusty box of Martha's old things in the attic, looking for a heavy winter quilt, when I found an old, rust-covered lockbox. It took me a good 20 minutes to pry it open with a flathead screwdriver. Inside were birth certificates, our marriage license, and a thick, yellowing manila envelope. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of paper stock certificates. I stared at them, the memories slowly filtering back through the fog of my grief. 22 years ago, before Preston was even in high school, I had done some side contracting work. A couple of scruffy college kids were trying to build a data compression algorithm in a rented garage, and they needed someone to install heavy-duty cooling vents and rewire the electrical grid so their primitive servers wouldn't burn the place down. They couldn't afford my full rate, so they paid me half in cash and half in equity for their ridiculous little company. The company was called OmniStream. I had tossed the certificates in the box and completely forgotten about them. I didn't follow the stock market. I didn't care about tech. My hands shaking, I pulled out my cheap prepaid smartphone and typed OmniStream into the search bar. My heart completely stopped. OmniStream wasn't a garage startup anymore. They had pioneered the backbone of modern cloud computing. They had gone public a decade ago, split their stock 3 times, and were currently trading at a staggering high. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I put on my only clean suit and drove to the offices of Harrison Wright, a senior wealth manager and an old golfing buddy I hadn't seen since Martha's funeral. Harrison took the yellowing certificates from my hands, adjusted his glasses, and stared at his computer screen for what felt like an eternity. "Henry," Harrison finally whispered, taking off his glasses. He looked pale. "Have you had these the entire time? You never liquidated?" "I forgot I had them," I admitted, feeling foolish. "Are they worth anything, Harrison? Can I pay off my mortgage?" Harrison let out a breathless, hysterical laugh. "Pay off your mortgage? Henry, after adjusting for the splits and compound growth, these shares. You own roughly 1.2% of one of the largest tech conglomerates on the planet. Speak plain English to me, Harry. He turned the monitor so I could see it. $45 million. I sat in his office for 3 hours. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't go out to a steakhouse. As the reality of my new, staggering wealth washed over me, the grief and depression that had suffocated me for months evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, searing, diamond-hard rage. "Harrison," I said, my voice steady, "I need to liquidate $10 million immediately, and I need you to set up a blind trust, a ghost holding company, completely untraceable to my name." "What are we buying, Henry?" Harrison asked, leaning forward, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Revenge," I said. Over the next 6 weeks, Harrison and I went to work. We created an entity called Ironclad Acquisitions. With my newly unlocked capital, I hired the most ruthless corporate private investigators money could buy to look into Vertex Solutions. What they found was pathetic. Preston was a fraud. The Lamborghini, the diamond ring, the penthouse, it was all a facade. Vertex Solutions wasn't changing the world. It was a sinking ship plagued by terrible management and bloated executive salaries. Preston had alienated his board of directors, and the company was suffocating under high-yield corporate debt. Preston was desperate. My investigators learned he was planning a massive Hail Mary PR stunt. He had somehow leveraged his remaining connections to secure a live, prime-time interview on the biggest financial news network in the country. He was going to use the live broadcast to announce a phony, revolutionary new AI platform in a desperate bid to artificially inflate his stock price and attract a buyout. He wanted a buyout? I was going to give him one. Through Ironclad Acquisitions, I quietly began buying up Vertex's distressed debt. I became their largest creditor overnight, but that wasn't enough. I wanted the throne. Harrison reached out to the 3 main venture capitalists who sat on Vertex's board. These men despised Preston's arrogance and were desperate to cut their losses. Behind closed doors, Ironclad Acquisitions offered to buy their voting shares at a 15% premium above market value. They tripped over themselves to sign the paperwork. The entire process took exactly 42 days. It was a masterpiece of corporate stealth. On the morning of Preston's highly anticipated live television interview, I sat at my kitchen table, drinking a cup of black coffee. I held a signed, legally binding binder of documents in my hand. I didn't just have my money back. I owned 51% of Vertex Solutions. I owned the intellectual property, the office furniture, the coffee machines, and the lease to that cherry-red Lamborghini. I owned my son, and it was time to let him know. The downtown broadcasting studio of the global financial network was a hive of chaotic energy. It was a place where fortunes were debated, stock prices were manipulated by talking heads, and the egos of tech billionaires were massaged for public consumption. On this particular Thursday evening, the star of the hour was Preston. My son sat in the center of the brightly lit green room, flanked by makeup artists who were frantically dusting powder over his forehead to hide the nervous sweat. He was dressed in a pristine, custom-tailored Italian suit that easily cost more than the truck I had driven to his office months prior. Beside him sat Tiffany, her eyes glued to the screen of her latest smartphone, occasionally glancing up to admire her own reflection in the dressing room mirror. She wore a designer dress that practically screamed new money, completely oblivious to the house of cards they were standing on. I stood in the shadows of the secondary control booth overlooking the studio floor. Beside me was Harrison Wright, his silver hair perfectly combed, holding the thick leather binder that contained the absolute, indisputable legal ownership of Vertex Solutions. We had bypassed the lobby security with embarrassing ease. When you possess documents proving you hold 51% of the voting shares of a company scheduled to be featured on primetime television, network executives tend to roll out the red carpet. The senior producer, a frantic man named Cameron, with a headset permanently fused to his ear, had initially tried to bar me from the set. "You can't go out there," Cameron had hissed, his eyes darting between me and the live feed monitors. "This is a highly coordinated, exclusive interview. Preston is about to unveil a major artificial intelligence platform. We have sponsors expecting a smooth broadcast. You are going to ruin the segment." Harrison had simply smiled, the kind of terrifying, predatory smile only a seasoned wealth manager can muster. He tapped the leather binder against the producer's console. "Cameron, let me be very clear. The man sitting in your makeup chair is a minority shareholder of a company drowning in high-yield distressed debt. My client, Henry, is the majority owner of Vertex Solutions. If you want a boring, rehearsed pitch about fake software, keep my client backstage. But if you want the highest ratings this financial network has seen in a decade, you will let him walk onto that stage when I give the signal. You are looking at a live, hostile corporate takeover. It is television gold." Cameron's eyes had widened. He looked at the legal seals on the documents, then at my face, hardened, unsmiling, and resolute. The producer's journalistic greed instantly overpowered his loyalty to Preston's PR team. He nodded slowly, backing away. "Camera 3 will track you when you enter. Do not curse on live television. We are on a 5-second delay, but don't risk it." Down on the floor, the studio lights flared to a blinding intensity. The countdown echoed through the overhead speakers. 5, 4, 3, 2. "Welcome back to Market Watch Live," the anchor announced, flashing a perfectly whitened smile at the main lens. "We are joined tonight by a young visionary who is sending shockwaves through Silicon Valley. He is the CEO and founder of Vertex Solutions, Preston. Thank you for being here tonight." Preston leaned forward, adopting the practiced, humble yet confident posture he had rehearsed 1,000 times in his penthouse mirrors. "It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me." "Let's cut right to the chase, Preston," the anchor said, shuffling his cue cards. "There have been rumors circulating that Vertex Solutions has faced some significant financial headwinds this quarter. Some analysts suggest your burn rate is unsustainable. Yet, you are here tonight to announce a massive pivot. Tell our viewers what is happening behind the closed doors of Vertex." Preston smiled, a slick, predatory grin that made my stomach churn. "Rumors are just that, rumors. They are spread by legacy competitors who are terrified of innovation. The truth is, Vertex Solutions has never been financially stronger. We are completely debt-free, we are heavily capitalized, and we are aggressively expanding. Tonight, I am thrilled to announce the launch of our proprietary neural network AI protocol, Project Apex. This technology will seamlessly automate enterprise-level logistics, saving corporations billions. We aren't just a software company anymore. We are the architects of the future. It was a staggering, pathological lie. Project Apex did not exist. My private investigators had torn through Vertex's internal servers. The AI protocol was a clunky, outsourced shell interface built by cheap contractors overseas. It was a desperate facade designed to artificially pump the stock price long enough for Preston to dump his remaining equity and run before the federal regulators caught wind of the fraud. "That is a bold claim, Preston," the anchor noted, leaning in. "With Project Apex, are you currently looking at acquisition offers, or do you intend to maintain independent control of Vertex?" Preston adjusted his expensive silk tie. "I will always maintain control of my company. Vertex is my life's work. I built it from the ground up with my own 2 hands, blood, sweat, and immense personal sacrifice. No one will ever take my vision away from me." I couldn't stomach another second of it. I looked at Harrison. He gave me a sharp nod. I pushed open the heavy soundproof door of the control booth and stepped out onto the catwalk, descending the metal stairs toward the brightly lit studio floor. My heavy steel-toed work boots, the same boots I had worn for 20 years on construction sites to put a roof over. Preston's head clanked loudly against the metal grates, echoing through the cavernous room. The cameramen shifted uncomfortably, but Cameron, the producer, frantically waved his arms from the booth, signaling them to keep rolling. Camera 3 immediately swiveled, framing my descent. I walked directly past the stunned floor managers, past the glaring stagehands, and stepped into the blinding halo of the main broadcast lights. Preston was in the middle of a sentence about his unwavering integrity when he finally noticed the movement in his peripheral vision. He turned his head, his practiced media smile freezing instantly. For a second, his brain simply could not process what he was seeing. He blinked, staring at my faded denim jeans, my flannel shirt, and the worn leather jacket I had owned since he was in high school. The color completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost under the studio lights. "Dad?" he whispered, his microphone catching the bewildered, trembling syllable. The anchor looked confused, glancing at his earpiece for instructions from the control booth. It appears we have an unexpected guest joining us on the set. Preston, is this your father?" "Security!" Preston suddenly shouted, his panic breaking through his polished facade. He stood up so fast, his chair rolled backward and slammed into the decorative backdrop. "Cut the cameras! Get him out of here! What is wrong with your security?" I ignored the anchor. I ignored the blinding lights. I walked straight up to the glass desk and slammed the heavy leather binder down with a deafening thud. "Sit down, Preston," I commanded. It wasn't the voice of a broken old man asking for a loan. It was the voice of a foreman who used to command crews of roughnecks on high-rise steel girders. It was a voice that demanded absolute obedience. Preston flinched, his knees buckling slightly before he caught himself. He looked wildly around the studio, expecting armed guards to drag me away, but the studio remained dead silent. The cameras continued to stare at us with unblinking red eyes. "Dad, you are having a mental breakdown," Preston stammered, trying to salvage the situation for the millions watching at home. He forced a strained, agonizing chuckle. "I apologize, everyone. My father has been unwell. He's confused. He doesn't understand where he is." "I know exactly where I am," I said, my voice cutting through the silent studio like a serrated blade. "I am standing in front of a liar, a fraud, and a thief." A collective gasp echoed from the dark corners of the studio where the crew stood. In the green room, off to the side, I saw Tiffany pressing her face against the glass partition, her jaw hanging open in shock. "Turn the cameras off!" Preston shrieked, slamming his fist on the desk. "They aren't turning off," the anchor said softly, a spark of pure journalistic adrenaline lighting up his eyes. He leaned back, giving me the floor. "You sat here and told the world you built this company with your own 2 hands, I said, staring directly into my son's terrified eyes. "You told them Vertex is debt-free. You told them Project Apex is the future. Let's correct the record, Preston. You didn't build anything. You stole my entire life savings. You took the $800,000 your mother and I spent 40 years bleeding for, promising you would use it for payroll. Instead, you used it to lease a luxury penthouse, buy designer jewelry for your fiancé, and park a $500,000 Lamborghini in your corporate garage." "That was a gift," Preston screamed, his voice cracking hysterically. "Legally, it was a family gift. You have no proof of anything. You are a pathetic old man trying to ruin my life because you are jealous of my success." "Success?" I barked a harsh, humorless laugh. I opened the heavy leather binder and pulled out a stack of financial audits, tossing them across the glass desk. "This is your success, Preston. Vertex Solutions is $86 million in the red. Project Apex doesn't exist. It's a shell interface coded by a third-party vendor in a basement halfway across the world. You are completely insolvent." Preston stared at the documents, his chest heaving as he hyperventilated. How did you get those internal audits?" Those are strictly confidential. I'll sue you. I'll sue this entire network for corporate espionage. You can't sue the owner of the company, Preston, I said quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound in the massive studio was the low hum of the air conditioning units and Preston's ragged, terrified breathing. "What are you talking about?" he whispered, shaking his head in denial. "Did you ever wonder who bought up all your distressed corporate debt over the last month?" I asked, leaning over the glass desk, towering over him. "Did you ever wonder why your venture capital board members suddenly went quiet and sold their voting shares to an anonymous holding company called Ironclad Acquisitions?" Preston's eyes widened to the size of saucers. "Ironclad? No. That's a multi-billion-dollar firm. That's impossible. You live in a crumbling house. You eat canned soup. You don't have that kind of capital." "I remembered the OmniStream stock I earned 20 years ago, Preston," I replied, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. "It split, it compounded, and it gave me the leverage to buy your pathetic, sinking ship." I pulled the final document from the binder, the official transfer of absolute control, signed, sealed, and legally binding. I slid it across the glass until it touched his trembling fingers. "I own 51% of Vertex Solutions," I declared, making sure my voice carried clearly into the microphones. "I own the intellectual property. I own the corporate accounts. I own the lease on that ridiculous cherry red car you drive. Note, I own this company. And as the new majority shareholder and acting chairman of the board, my first official act is a restructuring of our executive team." Preston began to openly weep. Tears ruined his expensive television makeup, leaving dark, pathetic streaks down his cheeks. "Dad, please, don't do this. Not on television. Please, we can talk about this. I'll pay you back. I swear, I'll give you the 800 grand back." "You don't have 800 grand, son. You don't have anything." I straightened my posture, looking down at the boy I had raised, feeling a profound, tragic emptiness where my paternal pride used to reside. "Preston," I said, my voice ringing with finality, "you are terminated, effective immediately. Clear out your desk by morning and leave the keys to the Lamborghini with the receptionist." I didn't wait for his response. I turned my back on my weeping son, walked off the brightly lit stage, and headed straight out the studio doors. I had a broken company to fix, employees to save, and a quiet retirement to finally enjoy. If you enjoyed this shocking story of betrayal and ultimate corporate revenge, please hit the like button and share this video with your friends. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our thrilling content. What would you do if your own family stole your life savings? Leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.